The shrimp fork was still cold in my hand when I felt it, that eerie stillness you get right before a tornado peels the siding off your world. The ballroom was all marble echoes and veal medallions, the kind of place where egos wear cufflinks and the Chardonnay flows like denial. I sat at table 7, right next to Mr. Kessler, CEO of Grenthorne Systems, a man whose handshake once decided a $90 million logistics deal. My dress was black, practical, with a neckline high enough to signal I'm not here to impress, I'm here to ensure your warehouse doesn't collapse. And yet somehow, I already knew this would be my last gala. See, I wasn't anyone special by title, just operations liaison, which sounds about as exciting as a tax seminar, but I was the name buried on page 42 of a 300-page defense contract, listed under essential continuity personnel. Corporate called it a key man clause. I called it my invisible ink, only noticeable when someone gets stupid enough to shine a flashlight on it. I was that flashlight. And before I go on, let me pause the orchestra and whisper something that actually does matter. 97% of you listening to stories like this haven't hit subscribe. And hey, I get it. We're all ghosts floating through content, scrolling between breakdowns. But if you do hit that button, it keeps the lights on for the crew making these stories sing, and reminds us someone out there still notices the invisible ink. Now, back to the linen napkin chaos. I'd been with Wallace and Bray for 12 years, long enough to know who refills the water pitchers and who lies on their quarterly reports. I got there back when the printer room had a fax machine and people still made eye contact. My job wasn't glamorous, but it mattered. Every Tuesday I had standing calls with Grenthorne's procurement leads. Every Friday I reviewed shipment redundancies like a surgeon spotting tumors. Every month I recalibrated performance benchmarks that saved millions and patted Jared's predecessor's bonus like a Tempur-Pedic. But no one remembered that, especially not Jared. Jared was new. Jared wore loafers without socks. Jared called women over 40 tribal knowledge assets, which is Silicon Valley code for we'd fire you if HR had the stomach for the fallout. He took one look at me and saw a salary line he could delete. He didn't ask who wrote the service level stipulations. He didn't ask who brokered the original agreement with Grenthorne after their last contractor misrouted 200 tank batteries to Fresno. He just saw someone who used bullet points instead of emojis and figured I was past my software update. Last few months had been a slow bleed. Cheryl from finance gone, Ramon from systems restructured. My Slack permissions began vanishing one tool at a time. HR stopped responding to emails. The Friday donut order mysteriously shrank by 2 boxes. It was a quiet campaign of disappearance, the kind of gaslighting you don't notice until your badge stops beeping and nobody bothers to ask why. So I printed the contract, not the summary, the whole damn thing. I highlighted clause 17.4 in yellow and slipped it into my tote bag with the grace of a woman who knew exactly where the landmines were buried and just needed someone dumb enough to dance. And then there was tonight. The gala, the pageantry, the fiddling while Rome's HR department burned. Kessler leaned toward me over his 3rd glass of wine, asking about our regional onboarding flows. I answered like I always did, clear, competent, and just a hair above robotic. He didn't need fireworks, he needed dependability, and I'd spent over a decade being the human duct tape between his systems and our C-suite's fantasies. Meanwhile, across the room, Jared laughed a little too loud with a circle of partners I'd onboarded myself back in 2016. He never looked over, didn't nod, didn't acknowledge I existed, which, honestly, fit the pattern. Ghosts don't get to haunt the living until someone realizes they're dead. I looked down at my plate. Veal, cold, a sprig of something green meant to distract you from how underseasoned the meat was. I thought about Cheryl, about Ramon, about all the people who left with boxes of family photos and 0 severance. And I felt it, not sadness, not anger, just this slow, tectonic shifting under my ribs, like something deep inside had decided to stop being still. It started with Cheryl. One Monday, she just wasn't there. No goodbye email, no farewell sheet cake. Just her desk, emptied except for a single post-it note on the monitor that said, in her careful script, they asked for silence. So here it is. That was the same week Ramon's calendar stopped populating. HR told us he'd taken a voluntary opportunity to pursue personal endeavors, which is the kind of corporate poetry you write when a man's livelihood is erased over Zoom. I asked around, softly, carefully, like a woman who's seen enough witch hunts to keep her matches dry. No one had answers, or at least, no one was willing to admit they did. Jared had been VP of Operations for a grand total of 7 months, and his first big initiative was what he proudly called the fat cut. Said it during an all-hands call with the same grin he used when posting morning gym selfies captioned "No days off," not even for HR. He didn't bother to name names, just said we'd be trimming redundancies to better align with post-pandemic scaling. Anyone who still had a desk just smiled like hostages and nodded. Jared didn't like legacy. That was his buzzword. Legacy systems, legacy protocols, legacy employees. He said it like it was a virus. But you know what Jared did like? LinkedIn engagement. Slack status messages that read "crushing it," and giving surprise one-on-ones that felt more like pre-funeral consultations. My own first red flag was subtler. I went to check the weekly SLA reports I've reviewed every Friday since Obama was still in office, and they were gone. Not moved, not archived, just gone. Access denied. I filed a support ticket with IT and got a templated reply that sounded like it had been written by ChatGPT's evil twin. Access to these directories is now managed under a revised security protocol. Please consult your department lead for approval. Thing is, I was the department lead, or I used to be. That's when I opened the Grenthorne folder on my personal drive, not the one on the cloud, the one I'd kept quietly updated on my home desktop, synced to a backup I didn't advertise, and I scrolled until I found the big one. The contract, the beast. It was dated March 2011, signatures from 2 VPs ago, a document written in legalese thick enough to drown in. I poured coffee. I pulled out a yellow highlighter, and I flipped to page 42. Clause 17.4 Continuity of Service Provision. The following individual S are designated as essential personnel. Removal from this project, whether through resignation or termination, shall constitute a breach of agreement unless pre-approved by both parties or replaced through mutual written consent. And there it was. My name, first, in ink. I stared at it like it was an obituary for someone I hadn't realized had died. The clause was there because of a scare we had back in 2010, when the old PM ghosted mid-project and left Grenthorne weeks from a shipping catastrophe. After that, they insisted, anyone critical to the flow had to be contractually cemented. Legal had added my name because, as they said, you're the one who actually holds this house together. I printed the page, just the one, highlighted the clause, folded it once neatly, and slipped it into the canvas tote I carried to every meeting Jared never invited me to. A few days later, I noticed my internal dashboard logins took longer to process. My seat at the monthly metrics review was removed from the invite list. My manager, if you could still call him that, responded to my calendar pings with that peculiar brand of HR-flavored gaslighting. We're experimenting with a leaner format this quarter, Ellen. Appreciate your flexibility. I wasn't being paranoid. I was being erased. The only problem was, no one told me what day they'd scheduled my execution. So I waited, quietly, like a blade tucked behind glass. And Jared? Jared was already sharpening his scissors, whistling while he cut. They say black tie events are where partnerships are sealed, but all I could feel was the slow untethering of mine. The fabric of the gown itched like guilt. My heels pinched like deadlines. I walked into that chandelier-glutted ballroom like a woman stepping onto a sinking ship, smiling for photos while knowing full well the lifeboats were reserved for the beautiful and the blind. The place reeked of money and fear, old executives with young dates, the clink of $300 stemware, and the soft murmur of people laughing too loudly at nothing. I'd been to this gala 9 times. I'd helped design the seating chart 5 of those. But this time, I wasn't on any planning committee. No one had sent me a dress code. I only knew I was invited because Mr. Kessler himself had texted me. You're coming, right? I made sure you're at my table. And there he was, Mr. Robert Kessler, CEO of Grenthorne Systems, leaning back in his chair like a man who'd seen 3 wars and still didn't trust peace. He was wearing a dark gray tuxedo that probably cost more than my entire living room, sipping bourbon neat with the calm detachment of someone who reads government contracts for sport. Ellen, he nodded as I sat down, you're the only reason we survived that 2014 backlog fiasco. Don't think I've forgotten, he meant it. Kessler wasn't one to waste praise. He handed it out like a black market organ, rarely, surgically, and only to those who'd earned it. Just glad we got you those fuel cells in time, I said, folding my napkin, voice steady, hands colder than the silverware. Across the ballroom, Jared held court with a half-circle of consultants and junior executives. He was all teeth and hair gel, gesturing like he was coaching a startup through a TEDx audition. Every now and then, someone at his cluster laughed too loud, some poor intern or director eager to suck up the fumes from whatever tech jargon he'd cribbed off Forbes that morning. He never looked my way. Not once. It was like I'd never existed, like someone had already wiped me off the org chart and was just waiting for IT to catch up. They'd seated me 2 chairs from Kessler, near a former state rep and a director from Janssen Aerotech. All small talk and fork clinks, but my mind was miles away, back at my desk, back in the cubicle where Cheryl used to keep a jar of mints and Ramon stuck comic strips to the printer. Back when team wasn't just a word Jared used before eliminating half of one. The salad came. Arugula and whatever edible flowers chefs like to pretend are worth $28. I picked at it. Kessler talked about supplier chain reforms and overseas compliance, topics I usually love, but tonight felt like distraction, like humming in a burning room. Your VP's here, Kessler said offhandedly, eyes drifting toward Jared. Yep, I replied, dry as drywall. He's very enthusiastic. Kessler raised a brow. Enthusiastic's one word. I smiled tight. He didn't press. He didn't need to. Men like him knew when someone was being phased out, they'd seen it too many times. Hell, they'd probably signed off on it more than once. But there was something in the way he looked at me, measured, curious, like a man checking for cracks in a dam he thought was solid. The night dragged in polite, sparkling misery. I answered questions. I passed rolls. I made eye contact and laughed when required. And all the while, Jared never looked over. Not once. Not a nod, not a glance, not even an accidental gaze that might signal, oh hey, I remember you exist and you're the reason we still have a logistics stream. It was like I'd already been deleted. Like someone had pressed backspace on my legacy and the cursor was now blinking where my name used to be. And the thing is, he could have acknowledged me. He could have waved. Could have said something like, glad you're here, Ellen, or even just a nod across the room. Basic decency, corporate style. But silence is louder when it's deliberate. And I knew in my gut the decision had already been made. I was just the last one to be told. Still, I kept my back straight. I clinked my glass during the toast. I didn't fold, because no one notices invisible ink until it bleeds. It came between bites of veal, cold, rubbery, overdosed. My knife had just met a bone it shouldn't have when my phone buzzed in my clutch like a distant warning siren. I don't check messages during dinners with clients. That's one of my rules. But something in the vibration felt off, longer, more insistent, like it knew. I slid the clutch open and thumbed the screen. Jared M., 8:44 p.m. Pack up Monday. We're streamlining. Services are no longer required. No greeting, no punctuation, not even my name. Just services, like I was a vending machine past warranty. My stomach didn't drop, my heart didn't race. There was no cinematic gasp, no shattered wine glass, no soft jazz pause, just stillness. The kind of stillness that comes when a blade finally exits the skin after years of pressure. I looked at it for 3 seconds, took a breath through my nose, and then, without turning my head, I tilted the screen toward Kessler. He was in the middle of swirling bourbon in his glass. He paused, read the message, once. Then again, his eyes didn't widen. His lips didn't part. He just set the glass down on the white linen, folded his napkin once, and leaned in like he was about to discuss something as mundane as freight capacity. Do you remember Clause 17.4? He asked, voice low, calm, deadly smooth. I nodded. He pulled out his phone, some matte black model that probably doubled as a satellite transponder in emergencies, and began typing. Deliberate, 2 thumbs, no urgency, no typos. Then he showed me the screen. To Jared M., I believe you just terminated our master service agreement as well. See you in court. He didn't press send immediately. He looked at me first, that question lingering in the air between us like smoke. Are you sure you want this? I didn't smile. I didn't blink. I just nodded again, barely more than a tilt. He sent the message. And in that moment, new silence was born, not the awkward kind, not the ceremonial hush before a speech, but a silence with gravity. A silence with consequences. Somewhere across the ballroom, Jared's phone buzzed in his jacket. He didn't check it right away. He was too busy laughing at his own story, surrounded by people who didn't know the floor had just fallen out from under him. Kessler turned back to his plate like nothing had happened, took another sip of bourbon, picked up his fork. I went back to eating. There was no panic in me, no rage, just a cold sense of completion, like watching a missile finally leave the silo after years of waiting underground. It wasn't vengeance. It was protocol. Jared thought he was streamlining. What he actually did was set off a legal landmine crafted by people who understood that continuity wasn't a buzzword, it was a contract, and he just violated it. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to argue. Jared's arrogance had fired the gun. All I did was make sure it was pointed at the right clause. Around the room, people kept chatting, toasting, cutting into overpriced protein, but I felt the shift like wind changing before a storm. Jared finally looked at his phone. His face didn't crack, not yet, but his brow furrowed. His jaw ticked. He stepped away from his circle toward the lobby, moving quickly and without his usual swagger. Kessler smiled at the dessert menu. They're doing creme brulee tonight, he said, like we were talking about weather. They always burn it, I replied. He grinned wider. Not the only thing getting torched. The creme brulee was burned, of course it was, but I ate every last bite like I was spooning justice out of a sugar-crusted coffin. Jared never returned to his seat. His chair sat there like a question mark with no answer, napkin still folded, wine untouched. From across the ballroom, I'd seen him read the text. His jaw clenched so tight his buttocks probably creaked. Then he stood up, abrupt and stiff, and disappeared into the shadows of the lobby like a man realizing mid-dance that his shoelaces were tied together. The rest of the gala played out like a string quartet on the Titanic. Waiters poured coffee. Toasts clinked. Speeches dragged on. But under it all, you could feel the shift, a subtle ripple beneath the tablecloths. Something had gone off. No one said it, but glances started darting like nervous fish in shallow water. Someone in PR whispered too loudly to the CFO. Phones began vibrating a little more than usual. And me? I sat there like a woman at her own wake, composed and full. When the awards were announced, I clapped politely. When they flashed Jared's name on the donor slide, I took a sip of lukewarm coffee and smiled just slightly. Because I knew. Grenthorne's legal team didn't need a calendar invite to start moving. Those people are ex-duty and still treat weekends like combat zones. By Saturday morning, they were already digging, through archived emails, past amendments, call logs, change requests, renewal terms. Sunday evening, someone in our finance department texted me a screenshot of a Slack message that simply read, "Who approved removing the clause holder?" No one replied. Monday came the way a hangover does, loud, cruel, and full of consequences. I showed up to the office at 8:29 a.m. sharp, as always. Hair neat, blazer pressed, contract copy still folded neatly in my tote bag. I nodded to the receptionist. She didn't make eye contact. That's when I knew it was already over. By 8:37, a guy from facilities, Mark, poor kid, showed up at my cubicle holding a small cardboard box and looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Hey, Ellen," he mumbled, not meeting my eyes. "I was told to help you, collect your things." "No need," I said, pulling out the box I kept under my desk for seasonal mug rotations. "I travel light." I dropped in my charger, my stress ball shaped like a shipping crate, one photo of my niece and nothing else. I didn't take the plaque from 2018. Let them keep their hollow trophies. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. Why make ghosts out of the still living? At the security desk, I removed my badge and slid it across the counter. The guard looked confused. "They said someone would walk you out." "No need," I repeated. The front door opened with a hiss. The sun was too bright, the parking lot too quiet, but I didn't linger. I didn't cry. I didn't even curse. I got in my car, shut the door, and waited 5 full seconds. Then my phone buzzed. "Kessler, 9:02 a.m. Sit tight. This gets fun." That was it. No emojis, no signature. Just 6 words with the casual menace of a trigger warning. By lunchtime, whispers were leaking from Grenthorne's vendor relations team. The termination was flagged. Internal compliance raised concerns. An email chain surfaced showing Jared had made unilateral staffing changes without consulting legal, violating the terms of engagement for a Tier 1 contractor. I didn't need to lift a finger. All I had to do was not interrupt the machine while it chewed through him. That afternoon, my inbox was locked. My Slack profile blinked inactive. My name was removed from the weekly meeting roster. But the thing about trying to erase a key name is, sometimes that name is the one that unlocks all the consequences. I wasn't gone. I was detonated. By Tuesday morning, Wallace and Bray's lawyers had already entered the first stage of corporate grief. Denial, with a side of white-knuckled panic. They sent a memo to Grenthorne claiming the clause in question, Clause 17.4, continuity of service provision, was contextual and non-binding under the current scope of vendor relationships. They even had the audacity to suggest the wording was outdated, referencing personnel no longer central to operational workflows. Here's the kicker: my name wasn't just scribbled in the margins. It was etched right there, bolded with a timestamp and initials from 3 executives, including the now-retired general counsel who used to call me the only adult in the damn building. And unlike most of the contracts Jared skimmed between reps at his standing desk treadmill, this one was never amended. Not once. Not in 12 years. Grenthorne's reply was swift. 1 sentence, 14 words. "Your firm has breached contract terms. Formal complaint and demand for damages incoming." By noon, the lawsuit was filed. Not threatened, filed. The number hit like a bomb: $38 million, immediate projected losses, government penalties, and potential delays in 5 military supply chains due to the severed continuity. But it wasn't just the dollar sign that did it. It was the fact that the breach was so stupidly preventable, so embarrassingly reckless, that PR couldn't even spin it. The firm's general counsel reportedly slammed a binder across a conference table and muttered, "You fired the clause holder?" Like he'd just found out someone accidentally donated the company credit line to a fake orphanage. Internal audits began within hours. HR logs were pulled. Email trails were scrubbed. Slack channels went read-only. Everyone was digging for someone, anyone, who could say they signed off on my termination. Didn't find anyone because there wasn't anyone. Jared, in all his sockless glory, had acted unilaterally. No legal review, no leadership sign-off, no due diligence, just vibes. He tried to pull rank, of course. Sent an all-hands email claiming the clause had aged out, that he was fully empowered to make strategic personnel decisions in alignment with post-pandemic restructuring goals. But HR wasn't biting. Legal wasn't biting. And the board. They weren't just not biting, they were sharpening their knives. A week later, an internal email leaked. 4 words in the subject line: "Who approved firing Ellen?" The thread had no replies, not even a single "let me check." Just a chain of executives quietly choking on their own omission. And me? I was on my porch, tea in hand, watching squirrels decimate my bird feeder. I didn't gloat, didn't toast, just let the sun soak into my knees, while Grenthorne's legal team calmly dismantled every excuse Wallace and Bray tossed their way. By Friday, the firm's stock dipped 6 points. By Monday, their biggest West Coast client canceled a contract renewal. Someone in comms had the brilliant idea to call it an unfortunate misalignment of internal protocols, which is legalese for we hit ourselves in the face with a rake. Jared stopped posting on LinkedIn. His last update, excited to lead our next phase of growth, was now a grave marker floating above a battlefield he didn't know he'd started. No one blamed me, because I hadn't pushed the avalanche. I just stepped aside and let it fall. They tried to hide it at first, shoved the whole mess behind a velvet curtain of legalese and press silence, but $38 million doesn't go quietly, and neither do government contracts. By the following Thursday, Wallace and Bray's board was herded into an emergency meeting that bled well past midnight. The kind where no one finishes their Pellegrino, and someone inevitably gets cornered in the hallway sobbing into a branded stress ball. The minutes leaked. Investor reps from at least 3 funds demanded heads, not metaphors, actual personnel terminations. One board member apparently asked, dead serious, "How do you accidentally fire someone named in a federal continuity clause?" Jared, in a last-ditch performance, tried to frame it as a miscommunication between HR and operations. He threw around words like fluid restructuring, climate, and alignment friction, but it didn't land. Not this time. Not with every C-level sitting there staring at a printed contract with my name on it. So they placed him on administrative leave, which is HR's version of slowly rolling you in bubble wrap before tossing you off the roof. His office was emptied overnight. His parking badge deactivated. They didn't even let him send a goodbye Slack. The general counsel, realizing his name had been on too many CC'd threads and too few action items, resigned before sunrise. No announcement. Just vanished. His assistant told someone he'd decided to refocus on family, which I guess is what you say when your inbox has become evidence. Audits began in earnest. Not the polite kind either. The kind where finance combs through meal reimbursements and IT pulls full text logs from every internal channel dating back 5 fiscal years. Half the firm went silent overnight, like rats realizing the lifeboats were reserved. And then came the cherry on the corporate sundae. Grenthorne's PR department issued a single-paragraph statement to the industry trades. It was clinical, bloodless, and brutal. Grenthorne Systems confirms a vendor continuity breach with Wallace and Bray. We are currently pursuing remedies as outlined in our agreement and have transitioned operational oversight accordingly. No spin, no dancing. Just confirmation that we'd screwed the pooch on a multi-year, multi-million-dollar deal. They were now in open pursuit of scalps. That same day, buried in my inbox between a coupon from Michael's and my niece's Girl Scouts fundraiser, came an email from Anonymous at W by internal com subject. No subject, you warned them. They didn't listen, that was it. 7 words, but it hit harder than all the lawsuits combined. I sat there for a long moment, rereading it, thinking about every meeting I'd sat through where I'd flagged risks, filed compliance updates, submitted continuity assessments. All of it either ignored or repackaged and presented by someone with a better jawline and a worse understanding of logistics. Now, in some basement war room, my name was finally being spoken. Not with reverence. Not even with respect, but with regret. It wasn't satisfying, not exactly. It was something quieter, deeper, like watching termites finally collapse the porch you told them about 5 years ago. And I didn't need a headline. I didn't need credit. All I needed was the sound of their panic echoing down the halls I used to keep standing. The invitation came by courier, not email. An embossed envelope tucked inside a navy folder bearing Grenthorne's logo in raised silver. Just my name. No miss, no preamble. Inside, a handwritten note on thick card stock. Lunch. I treat, just us. RK, there was no RSVP button, no location link, just a time, a date, and the name of a small bistro I hadn't been to since it catered for one of our earliest logistics summits. Back then, Kessler was just a regional director with a map tattooed to his brain and an allergy to incompetence. Now, he was CEO of the whole damn machine, and still remembered the waitress who got his order wrong once in 2013. I showed up 2 minutes early. He was already there, no tie, no bodyguard, just a clean linen shirt and a glass of iced tea sweating beside a spiral notebook. No laptop, no lawyer, no PR rep perched behind the ficus. It wasn't business theater, it was real. "Ellen," he said, standing, shaking my hand like we were sealing a pact instead of greeting for lunch. "You look unbothered." "I'm getting good at it," I said, taking my seat. Didn't talk about Wallace and Bray right away, or the lawsuit, or Jared. He asked about my niece, my garden, whether I still made those sweet potato biscuits I used to bring to supplier meetings. I asked him if his warehouse team ever figured out the pallet tracking software I warned them would fail during leap years. He laughed, he remembered. Eventually, he leaned forward. No menu, no signal to the waiter. "I'm offering you a position," he said. "Director of Continuity, it's yours to define. You set the hours, the scope, the title structure. I don't want optics, I want stability." I waited a beat before answering. "What happened to your current Director of Continuity?" I asked, sipping water. He smirked. "We were hoping to invent the role with you." The folder slid across the table. 6 pages, no fluff, no NDAs that doubled as burial shrouds. Just clean lines, clear numbers, and a salary that made me blink twice because it wasn't just generous, it was respectful. He watched me scan it, then said, "You can take it home." I shook my head, reached into my own bag and pulled out something heavier than it looked, the old Grenthorne contract, still folded, still highlighted on page 42. I laid it flat between us and tapped the clause. "Keep this," I said, "just in case your next VP can read." He didn't laugh, he just nodded solemn, like I'd handed him a family heirloom. I flipped back to the offer sheet. Everything looked right except one detail. I grabbed the pen from the check presenter. 2 things, I said, crossing out a line. First, I don't want the word legacy anywhere in my title. I'm not a ghost and I'm not some artifact you dust off when systems fail. Kessler nodded. Done. And second, I pick my own successor. When the time comes, he blinked, then grinned. I didn't expect you to be thinking that far ahead. I always do. We didn't toast. There was no dramatic signature moment, no waiter interrupting with cake and fanfare. Just a deal made in daylight between two people who knew what silence cost. I left the old contract on the table, the ink smudged slightly from my thumb. It had done its job, now I would do mine on my terms. They lost it, officially. The news dropped on a Wednesday morning, tucked inside the third paragraph of a Wall Street Journal write-up about vendor mismanagement and the rising cost of corporate oversight. Wallace and Bray's name was bolded, the way shame usually is when someone forgets that contracts aren't just paper, they're promises. Grenthorne Systems had terminated all engagements with immediate effect. No negotiation, no grace period, just one sentence from their legal department. This vendor failed to honor continuity obligations and has been deemed non-compliant. Wallace and Bray's stock fell 11% before lunch. By close of day, analysts estimated $250 million in long-term losses, once you factored in the ripple effect. 2 government audits, 1 canceled aerospace bid, and 3 clients quietly initiating review of partnership terms. Inside the firm, chaos grew roots. The CFO tried to spin it in an internal email as a mutual disengagement, but no one bought it. You can't mutually disengage when you're the one holding the smoking gun with your name etched into the grip. Jared's LinkedIn, once a smug stream of thought leadership drivel and gym selfies, went dark. His profile photo disappeared. His banner, once a filtered cityscape captioned Building Operational Excellence, was replaced with a blank gray box. Rumors flew. Some said he took a strategic sabbatical, others that he was consulting independently. But insiders knew he was last seen boxing up his standing desk accessories, while HR waited like bouncers outside a nightclub for deadbeat interns. Whispers reached me through back channels. One VP allegedly muttered during a board meeting, "Next time someone says key man clause, I'm tattooing it to my forearm." But by then, I wasn't there. I wasn't on their call logs or in their Slack threads. I wasn't being CC'd or quietly looped in. I was gone, and that was the point. I spent the next month working part-time from my back porch, if you can call occasional strategy calls and invoice approvals working. My new Grenthorne contract didn't include punch cards or performance reviews, just a clear directive: keep us standing. The rest of the time, I read books I never finished, tended my late summer tomatoes, drank coffee that hadn't been reheated 3 times between meetings. No alarms, no team-building workshops, no Jareds. One afternoon, while the sun warmed the balcony and the neighborhood kids made noise like hope down the street, a brown parcel arrived. No return address, no note. Inside, a frame, black walnut, glossy glass, and behind it the original Wallace and Bray Grenthorne contract. Page 42 facing out, clause 17.4, highlighted in faded yellow. My name, Ellen D. Renner, still legible, still standing. I set it beside me, poured a second glass of Pinot, and leaned back in my chair. The breeze was soft. The silence clean, and I thought not of revenge, not of fury, not even of triumph. Just this: they should have asked who the key man was before pulling the trigger. You're the real MVPs of the office jungle. Thanks for watching. Smash that subscribe button, or the coffee pot might just forget your next brew.